I would now like to invite our keynote speaker, Dr. And thank him for being online from Canada. It must be very, the time zone is a completely different one, and it must be very late over there. Dr. Fernand De Varennes, and he is a former UN Special Rapporteur on minority issues. He's appointed by the Human Rights Council of the UN. His work focuses on minority issues, human rights of minorities, preventing ethnic conflicts, and advocating for the rights of the migrants. Dr. Varennes is also dedicated to exploring the relationship between ethnicity, human rights, and democracies, utilizing federalism and autonomy arrangements to address cultural conflicts. Dr. Varennes, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Afia. Good morning, everyone. Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be part of this hybrid conference on violence against minority women. Although, unfortunately, I have to speak to you from Cardiff in Wales. I'm actually in the United Kingdom right now because I'm attending another conference here. So I'm unable to join you in person today. First, also, many thanks to all of the organizers, and especially the South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, for the honor and privilege of being able to contribute online today. Well, first, let's state clearly that minority women can too often be doubly affected in the enjoyment or the denial of their human rights because of their gender, but sometimes also because of their ethnicity or religion. And this double marginalization or vulnerability occurs also in the denial of their human rights in a number of countries. Now, unfortunately, this double vulnerability appears even to be increasing in South Asia, in part because of growing religious nationalism in some countries, in part also perhaps driven by growing and widespread hate speech in social media against minorities, which unfortunately has also fueled even more targeted hatred against women of minority background. Women of minority background who are often objectified, or they encounter increasing abuse, stereotyping, and often, unfortunately, denial of their rights. And one of the cases which I brought up at the United Nations involved in 2022, so quite recently, the harassment of Muslim women in India through social media applications, such as known as Suli deals or Buli Bay, which I am told may have helped the efforts that we exercise, the attention that we focused on the treatment of these minority women in India, apparently helped pressure authorities to prosecute those behind this objectivization of women, which I described at the time as presenting Muslim women in India as modern-day slaves or sexual objects in social media apps. Hundreds of Muslim women were listed for auction on the mobile application with photographs that were sourced without permission and doctored and changed. Now, action was taken to prosecute the individuals who were responsible. However, they were subsequently released on bail, and there is no clear indication of when their trial would be occurring. But at least the international focus and attention, and drawing also exercising pressure, if you will, from the international level, was able to force authorities to take some steps to better respect and protect the human rights of these minority women. And in fact, in recent years, myself and quite a few of my colleagues at the United Nations, including other special rapporteurs or members of different working groups at the United Nations, we've seen an increase of in a number of cases where we have expressed very grave concerns at the denial of the rights of minority women, and even involving violence and atrocities. On numerous occasions, we've expressed our disappointment at how, for example, Dalit women are at the receiving end of large-scale sexual and physical violence, which the institutions of the state appear unable, or in some cases clearly unwilling, to respond to systematically. On a number of occasions at the United Nations, it has been brought to our attention that from the beginning of the legal process, with the lodging of what you know as the first information reports at local police stations, all the way through to the judge's opinion, Dalit women in India are often faced with daunting obstacles in the prosecution of their case and in obtaining justice. We've dealt with cases where even if the police agree to file the first information report, they often fail to efficiently and deliberately collect the necessary evidence. In some reports, we've pointed out that witnesses, where they exist, rarely agree to come forward to testify or to corroborate the victim's statement, Dalit women, because, well, they're afraid of retribution, and because they're often in positions of relative power when they are from the offenders are often in positions of relative power when they are from non-Dalit castes. And even we've seen, even if the case manages to get filed and investigated, despite these obstacles, then new problems arise. Minority women, especially Dalits, goes before a judge whose gender biases, and sometimes, we have to be honest, caste affiliations, can greatly influence the judgment in a case. So a Dalit woman, minority woman, at every stage risks being treated in a discriminatory way in denial of her equal rights as a woman and as a Dalit before the justice system. And for these reasons, and because of low reporting, there is data that we have which show that convictions in sexual and physical violence against Dalit women are shamefully uncommon. And to repeat that word, one of the most shameful cases of acquittal occurred with the well-known case of Banwari Devi, whose rapists were acquitted on the judge's reasoning that an upper caste man could not have defiled himself by raping a lower caste woman. This is still, unfortunately, the reality before the justice system for minority women in India and other parts of South Asia. I also reported 2 years ago as Special Rapporteur after the rape and murder of two Dalit sisters, aged 15 and 17, that there appears to be an increase in attacks against minority women such as these. But also, just to give you another example, a few years ago was recently the example of two Christian women in Manipur who were raped by members of a Hindu mob, with the police not proceeding with this case, despite the existence of a video of the attack, until essentially Indian authorities were forced to react and respond because largely of international attention and pressure, and also pressure and attention from NGOs, many non-governmental organizations, and also church groups that were appalled by what occurred. And just a few weeks ago, colleagues at the United Nations issued a press release expressing dismay at the continuing lack of protection for young women and girls belonging to minority communities in Pakistan. And I'd like to quote from that press release. Christian and Hindu girls remain particularly vulnerable to forced religious conversion, abduction, trafficking, child, early and forced marriage, domestic servitude, and sexual violence. The exposure of young women and girls belonging to religious minority communities to such heinous human rights violations and the impunity of such crimes can no longer be tolerated or justified. We were concerned, and this is occurring right now, we were concerned that forced marriages and religious conversions of girls from religious minorities are, in a sense, validated by the courts. The courts, in some cases, are often invoke religious law to justify keeping the victims with their abductors rather than allowing them to return to their parents. And I quote again, perpetrators often escape accountability with police dismissing crimes under the guise of love marriages, end of quote. From a human rights point of view, we indicated that a woman's right to choose a spouse and freely enter into marriage is central to her life, dignity, and equality as a human being, and must be protected and upheld by law. This is also a right for minority women, even within a majority religion. I am told of laws in Bangladesh which prohibit marriages between Rohingya in refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, and I'm told this prohibition tends to impact on young women in particular. So the list goes on. And the main point to keep in mind is that it is not only as women that these people are denied their human rights. It is because of their dual marginalization that they are disproportionately impacted and treated doubly unequally and doubly vulnerable. At the international level, at the United Nations human rights system, and especially special procedures, we have actually taken quite a few steps to highlight these situations. It has had some limited impact in some cases, but obviously much, much more has to be done to reform the judicial system, to increase pressure and to ensure that human rights, equal human rights, are fully respected, especially in relation to the doubly discriminated, doubly marginalized women from minority backgrounds. Thank you very much. Shukran.
Thank you very much for giving us a detailed overview of the situation and how the UN has viewed, as well as the recommendations, and highlighting the these very, very disturbing realities that the networks, or rather the law enforcement agencies, which are supposed to be seen in the role of a protector, are either not doing anything about the protection role, as well as not picking up the perpetrators, which actually perpetuates the sense of insecurity, and especially amongst the women who within their own communities also do not find that kind of a protection. So thank you very much for highlighting this issue. And this is also something that we all need to take a very good hard look at, because it also encourages the kind of vigilante justice that, which I think it's an oxymoron to use the word justice with vigilante, which it promotes. Then, that it becomes so difficult for people to be able to get to the perpetrators and pick them up and allow them to proceed through the due process of law, because the law also is afraid of that kind of a mob violence that results. We've seen in recent times, even in my country. So these are things that we all need to take a very long, hard look at and see how we can overcome these issues. So thank you very much again. And yes, even for, especially because in UK, it must be very early. It's not just that in Canada, it must be late. In UK, it must be very early. So for you to go give us time and your very thoughtful analysis on the situation of minorities in South Asia, I'm very grateful to you, Dr. Varennes.